From the southeastern corner of western North Carolina, this is Folklore. I'm your host, James Hernician. In the introduction to my interview with Clayton Price, who is one of two Republican primary challengers for Polk County Sheriff Tim Wright's job, I began by pointing out that police officers tend to prefer to ask the questions rather than answer them. I still think that's generally true, but the other challenger, State Trooper Keith Henderson, may be an exception. He's even self-aware enough to call himself a talkative guy. It doesn't mean he's quite as forthcoming as I like my podcast guests to be when it gets to details. He is, after all, running for public office, and it makes sense that he would choose his words carefully. And it also makes sense that a lot of what he has to say was similar to what I heard from Chief Price. In part, that's because I wanted to explore what I think has become a fundamental problem across this country: the lack of confidence among civilians that their law enforcement agents, whether federal, state, or local, will choose to protect them rather than follow orders that might not be based on the law or the Constitution. We all saw what happened in Minneapolis. This is a tough subject for someone who wants to be sheriff, but I think my questions were fair, and I did my best to tease out straight answers that can help you identify some of the differences between the candidates. You can judge how well I succeeded by listening to the rest of this episode, and if you haven't already, to my talks with Chief Price and Neenan Nesbitt, who is collecting signatures to run as an independent candidate this November. I sat down with Keith at his family's ice cream shop in Columbus on the evening of February 19th.
Keith Henderson, welcome to Folklore.
Thank you very much for having me.
Tell me a bit about yourself. Where are you from, and how did you get to the point where you got into law enforcement, and then how did you get to the point where you wanted to be sheriff?
Okay. Well, I grew up in Rutherford County, down in Ellenboro. I went to college for a couple of years in Western Carolina and found out that college was not my thing. So I made a little bit different path. While I was in college, I kept seeing law enforcement things pop up on the computer and people talk about it, and it was really interesting to me. So I got out of college and I came to isothermal and went to BLET at 20 years old, I believe I was. And I finished BLET, and then I went to the Forest City Police Department. That was my first law enforcement job. I was there for about a year and a half, and then I went to the North Carolina Highway Patrol. And then I spent a little over 17 years there.
So almost 20 years in law enforcement?
Pretty close.
Sounds like a long enough resume to me.
Some days it seems like it.
And how long have you lived here?
Well, right after I got out of BLET, I married my wife and moved to Mill Spring. So I've been here for 18 years, just over 18 years. We just had an anniversary. So
Congratulations.
I appreciate it.
That's a pretty short bio. Anything else people should know about you? Like, got hobbies?
Like a lot of people around here, I like hunting and fishing, golf, but mostly work with the Highway Patrol. Our way our schedule is, you just work most of your life.
Now, how do you work the ice cream shop into that?
Usually when I'm off, when I get off of shift. The last couple years as a trooper, I had the pleasure of being mainly a day shift guy, so I could get off there in the afternoon, come by here and work in the ice cream shop until it closed at night. We own the ice cream shop here on Main Street, and we've been in and out of the ice cream business for about 8 years now.
I just think it's an interesting combination, law enforcement and ice cream. I'm not saying law enforcement is the opposite of ice cream, but
it is different. It was something that my wife initially was drawn to. And, in law enforcement, you need to have something that is not law enforcement, I guess, to get away a little bit, get your mind clear.
I totally understand that.
And what better place to clear your mind from all the bad every day than to come and see people smile and scoop ice cream?
Nice balance. So how did you come to the decision that you think the current sheriff needs to be replaced?
Well, my wife and I were sitting around a couple years ago, and we were actually complaining about something with the Sheriff's Department. I don't remember what it was at the time. But I told her, I can't complain about it if I'm not willing to do something to try to fix it. So we talked about it, prayed about it. We got our minds together and decided then that I would run. And just the way the chips fell, it all worked out, and here I am running now. I want to change certain things as a member of the public and as a member of law enforcement with what we currently have. My biggest push that I'm making for my campaign, our slogan is safety first, community always. Safety has always been the priority of law enforcement. That is why you have law enforcement, to keep everybody safe. But I think the foundational thing with law enforcement is the community policing, the community connection with the sheriff's department. Everything else, law enforcement wise, can stem from that. Community can help you. You can help the community. If you know what's going on, law enforcement in general is reactive. I want to make a push to be more proactive, because if you're more proactive, the less reaction you'll have to do. Just like if I see you speeding and I stop you and write you a ticket, that's reactive. I saw you speeding, I get to write you a ticket. But if I can see you at Food Line and talk to you, and maybe it comes up safety issue, or maybe I seen you the other day and you got a little too fast, we can talk about it. We can be friends, and maybe it changes your mind and slows you down. Now we're proactive. And again, if you're proactive, you don't have to rely so much on the reactiveness of it. In theory, the crime would go down, the problems would go down.
Well, it sounds like a strategy that almost any chief of police or sheriff would probably approve of. What you're saying is Sheriff Wright has just basically sort of strayed from that?
Well, part of the conversation that my wife and I have had is we're business owners here. We live here. I was a law enforcement officer that actually worked in the county. Our kids go to school here, and I almost know none of the deputies. I know a couple of them from years past, and that was a shame to us. That was a problem with us, that being as big a part of the community as we are, we don't know them. So if we don't know them, I know the normal citizen that's never been in law enforcement or doesn't own an ice cream shop in the middle of Columbus, I know they don't know them. And if you don't know them, they can't help you, and you can't help them the way you need to in law enforcement.
In other words, the police should be an intimate part of the community. They should be recognized.
Absolutely.
And they should be taking part and seen in, not in a reactive capacity all the time, but also in just a background level.
Correct. Because again, you'll learn more about what's going on in the county. So let's say you go to Dev's Mini Mart and you're community policing, you're talking with someone. Well, inevitably somebody's going to pop up and say, "Oh, hey, so-and-so down the road is the biggest drug dealer in Polk County." Well, maybe you didn't know that. Well, now you have that little tidbit of information that you can take, you can investigate. Because these people, when they're telling you this, they're not telling you to tattle. They're telling you because they're concerned for their life. They're concerned for their community. So if you can go and investigate what they're telling you, and hey, if it's true, put the law to them and give them what they need.
Do you think people aren't comfortable just walking up to the sheriff or his deputies and expressing their concerns?
I don't. Again, I even have grown children that live in this county. I have friends in this county. I have neighbors. I've talked to a lot of people that their mentality is, "Oh, that officer didn't even look at me," or they came into Calvert's and kind of turned their nose up and looked away, and they don't feel like they're approachable. They don't feel like that they can go up and have a conversation. It's almost like they perceive the officers to be better than them.
And you've decided to run as a Republican. It's going to be blunt here. Is that simply because that's the most logical way to get elected in this county as a Republican?
I've been a Republican since I registered to vote when I turned 18.
Okay. It's just that I think a lot of people would like it if their police weren't partisan.
And now I don't think that the sheriff's position should be partisan, because as the sheriff, as a deputy, as any law enforcement, we don't get to write laws and we don't get to interpret laws. We get to enforce the laws that are there. So our partisan opinion doesn't get to play a part in that. If you're speeding, you're speeding. If you hit your wife, you've hit your wife. It's black and white. There is no partisan decision that comes in here. You don't get to say, oh, well, the Republican Party doesn't like this, so we're going to enforce it, or the Democrat Party loves this, we're going to leave it alone, or whatever. You don't get to make those decisions as a law enforcement officer.
I just think that if this was 30 or 40 years ago, when there were lots of people all across the spectrum on the Republican Party and lots on the Democrat Party, I mean, then people switching sides and on votes in the House and Senate all the time, that doesn't happen anymore. People are very polarized now around the ideology associated with their party. And so it seems to me that it makes the argument for a nonpartisan sheriff's department to be even more convincing.
Right. Well, and if you look at the Polk County stats currently, there are more independents or unaffiliated voters than there are Republican or Democrat. I think Republican and Democrat both have an extreme side. And I think in general, people want to stay away from the extremes. So they gradually migrate towards the center. And I think as an unaffiliated person, they feel like that they get more of a say-so because they're not trying to follow some extreme wing of either way.
Well, I asked this, and I know I'm a little obsessive about it, but it's simply because the first interview I did on this race was with Neenan Nesbitt, who's trying to run as an independent candidate. Now he's going to need 600 and some votes to get on the ballot. So it's a little bit of work. And it sounds to me like you wouldn't be opposed to that idea, but it's a kind of a heavy lift.
No, I'm not opposed to that. Again, the office of sheriff doesn't get to have their feelings involved with whatever law that's being broken. They, it's either being broken or it's not. You enforce it. Now, there's different levels of enforcement, but you get to enforce it either way. But I guess I've been Republican because that's what I've always been. That's what my parents were. That's kind of how I got signed up, and that's where my ideals generally fall on the Republican side. But as a sheriff, I don't think that is your decision to be one way or the other. The law's written, so
okay,
it's there for everyone.
All right, well, I'll let that go because I just find it very fascinating to look at how the country has become so split. And I think we'd better if more of our offices were nonpartisan, especially when it comes to something like.
Well, like I said, if you're writing laws or if you're interpreting laws, then I can see more where your mindset may come into play. But in the middle, not so much.
Well, we'll go back to one of the consequences of this later, but let's move on to this next thing. Why are you the guy that should be the new sheriff?
I think what separates me, at least from the current administration and the other two gentlemen that are running, I'm not real sure, but I actually care what happens. Again, like I said, I've got my businesses here. I live here. My kids are here. My grandkids here. It matters to me. My kids are in these schools, and I want to be the one to try. I want to try to make Polk County a little safer. I want to try to make Polk County a little better. I want to try to increase the community policing. I want to try to increase the training of the officers. I want to put forth my best effort to make this the best Polk County we can.
I just think that's an answer that most candidates would give, in a sense. I mean, they're all supposedly living in Polk County, right? And for instance, one of your opponents, Clay Price, he's a Saluda police chief. He doesn't live in Saluda, but he's still committed to the town. So I'm looking for a more specific answer than just I'm part of this community, because everyone's going to claim that.
I guess my best answer would be your example of Clay not living in Saluda, but being or being the chief of Saluda, he cares, but does he care to the point of it being his neighbors? And that brings us right back to the community policing thing. If you're part of this community, you're more uh, involved, you're more affected by what goes on. So me being here, I think, is a major thing. I've lived here for the last 18 years. I've built my life here, my family here. I think that matters. Is it the end all be all? No, I don't think so. But I think it is a major part of that. With me, I guess I've been on the outside of the sheriff's department. I was a police officer. I was a trooper. I've been on the outside looking in. So without being inside of it, I get to see from kind of a public view of what's going on, what needs to be done. But I get also a little bit of inside baseball there too. And I just feel like there's things that need to be changed. And in my mind, I just feel like I'm the guy to make those changes. Because again, as a police officer, as a trooper, police officers, troopers, and deputies, we all have the same main goal, and that's safety. That's what we're here for. That's why people want us. They want us when things go bump in the night to show up and take care of them, make sure everybody's safe. However, each one has a slightly different job. They have a slightly different way of doing it. As a trooper, I ride around, write seatbelt tickets and speeding tickets and arrest drunk drivers. That's our main thing is traffic. Sheriff's deputies, their main things are the jail, civil, courthouse, answering calls out in the community. Police officers are kind of a combination of both. They get to do a little bit of highway patrol, they get to do a little bit of deputy. But I do get to see the sheriff's department side, like I said, from a public perspective, from a general public perspective, but also being involved the way I was, I still get to see what happened on the inside. I still get to deal with people going to jail. I still get to deal with the courthouse. I still get to see the civil paper served or whatever. So I think it gives me a good, well-rounded perspective of what the county needs from our law enforcement. Well, and as a trooper, I started my career with the North Carolina Highway Patrol in Mecklenburg County, the largest county in the state, the most populated place. You get to see it all there. You'll see more there in a year than someone in Polk County would in a career. And I've went about everywhere between Mecklenburg and Henderson County. So I've got a good array. I've got to see different sheriffs. I got to see different police departments, work with different troopers, different supervisors, different public, different mindsets. The mindset of the public in Mecklenburg County is totally different than the mindset of people in Polk County. So I've got that experience working for me and you get to use it. Just because the mindsets are different doesn't mean that you can't implement some of that in Polk County. Like sovereign citizen ideology was a big thing in Mecklenburg County. People don't think they have to follow the laws or the rules the way they're written. Well, Polk County, not so much. But has it happened? Yes. So I got to use the experience that I got in Mecklenburg back here in Polk County for doing that. Whereas if I'd have started in Polk County, the one person I dealt with for that, I wouldn't know what to do. But I got the experience, and for that, I'm thankful.
Okay. I think I've got a good idea. What I'm trying to do is every candidate I interview, I want to get like a thematic core to why, you're special and compared with the other guys. Anyway, the thing I really am interested in talking about, given what's been happening over the last few months in this country, is the sense of anxiety that I think a lot of Americans have with law enforcement officers, and in a general term. I'm not sure people can easily distinguish between a federal, a state, and a local police officer, someone in a uniform, with firearms. And what we've seen on television up in Minnesota and the West Coast, even in Charlotte, with the federal agents under ICE and Border Patrol, it's got to be troubling. to a lot of people. And so how do you go about, if you're a sheriff, trying to build trust with people who might be anxious? There's certain members of the community, certain subsets of the community who are going to be anxious around law enforcement officers, thanks to what we've seen over the last few months.
Right. And that's where the community policing comes in so great. Because if you're out there with these people as a sheriff deputy of Polk County, if you're out there and you're communicating on the regular, they're seeing you regular, they're, you know, I don't know, they'll see your smiling face at Calvert's restaurant or at McGuinn's store in Sunnyview, or throw a hand up and wave at them as you drive down the road. Maybe you stop and talk to them while they're cutting grass. If you're getting that connection, if you're building that, they're more comfortable with you. They're more relaxed with you. They're more likely to come to you if they have a concern. Well, let's say, for instance, ICE came to Polk County. They would be more comfortable coming to you because they've talked to you before. They know you. Maybe they have your telephone number in their phone. They can come to you and you can calm them down. You can relax them. You can talk them through it. That's what I said, that community connection is the basis for all the other stuff.
Right. So you have a responsibility to your community to protect them. That's your job, right? What happens, and this is the tough question, what happens when there's a conflict between your obligation to the community that you're serving and orders from federal agents who may not be following the law or the Constitution as you interpret it?
Well, as the sheriff, as the deputy, as any law enforcement officer, you have to follow the law. The law is the law. If federal law enforcement come to Polk County, they're not in control of the sheriff's department. They don't get to just give orders and do whatever. My goal would still be safety. If they're here to do their job, that's on the federal government. That's them. My job as a sheriff would be to instruct my deputies to make sure everybody's still safe. They can still do their job, and they can still do it the way the law is intended. I guess the easiest way would be me to explain it. For the nearly 20 years of law enforcement that I've got, knock on wood, I've never had to fight anybody. I've arrested hundreds of people. I've wrote thousands and thousands of tickets. I've never had to fight anybody. And I pride myself on that because I've been able to talk my way through it. I've been able to, just because I have to arrest you because you were drunk driving, doesn't mean we have to fight it out. Don't mean we have to tase you or shoot you. It just means you've messed up. Now I get to take you to jail. And if I can talk you through it, if I can talk you into letting me put the handcuffs on without force, then I feel like I've won. I've completed a task that I wanted to do safely. Nobody got hurt. And it's the same way. If someone is illegal and ICE is going to arrest them, they can still arrest them without having to fight and chase and whatever else they need to do. You can do it in the right way. And again, if you're out in this community, if you're a member of this and you're talking as a deputy, you shouldn't have to be out fighting and doing that kind of thing.
It's just that what we saw in Minneapolis was clearly federal agents going far beyond their legal boundaries, and a couple of people are dead.
Well, we get to see video clips and snippets of it. We don't get the totality of everything happening because we're not there. In law enforcement, I've seen it lots of times where something happens. Maybe you get to see a video clip, or maybe the public heard rumors of something. But unless you're actually in an officer's mind, knowing what to do, officers have to make split-second decisions every day. And people in the news media or the public, they get to go back later and watch those video clips or think, well, I wouldn't have done it that way, or whatever it is. So unless you're actually in the officer's mind, it's really hard to know what you would do. In the situations like Minneapolis, we got to see a few video clips. Was it right, wrong? I can't testify to it because I wasn't there. I couldn't say.
Well, certainly you wouldn't take the stand and,
Right.
and from the point of view of someone in Polk County. But I'm saying if you had to make a decision on a split-second decision to defend your constituent or not defend your constituent based on something you were not sure was right.
I would still fall back to safety because let's just assume ICE was coming in trying to do an illegal arrest. Maybe it was causing problems. You get to fall back on safety. Whatever is safe for everyone, not just who they're arresting, not just law. It's safety for everyone. It's kind of like I would associate it with kind of like a car chase. So I'm chasing you for some reason. Maybe you were speeding and I'm chasing you. In my mind, I have to weigh, is it better to chase you and potentially you wreck or wreck someone else? Or do I get the tag number and then come get you later? And that's just something every officer has to do in that moment. I couldn't give a blanket answer to what would I do in X situation. I think I would have to be in that situation to know, but I would rely back on safety of everyone.
Okay. Well, I got to push us spark on that. I wish we weren't talking about this, but it is something that I think a lot of Americans, maybe not so much of Polk County, we're not going to be high on ICE's radar. We'll say, I don't want to exaggerate the problem, but I just want to get at the philosophy of if you are caught between federal agents who believe they have a certain degree of authority and your own authority, and let's hope you never have to choose.
I would hope I wouldn't have to. Again, my initial response would be to be available if needed for a situation. But I would just not send my people out to go assist ICE in doing their job. I think, they have their job, and if they're going to do it, and they're going to do it in a safe way, do your job. And if I'm needed, I'm over here, but I'm not going to go help do their job.
Well, you've got a couple of decades up behind you, and you say you've never had to get into a physical altercation.
I've not.
And haven't pulled your gun?
Oh, I've pulled guns. I mean,
But you haven't fired your gun.
I've never fired a gun, no. But part of, our policy is highway patrol and stuff. At the end of a chase, that's part of what we do is pull the gun. That's been done, but I've never had to fire it. No.
Well, I think that's great to know. And Polk County isn't the most violent of places.
Generally
right?
not. It's all unknown. I mean, really, Polk County can be as violent as Chicago in that split second that something bad happens. We generally are not because we don't have the population of some of these other bigger places.
If you end up being sheriff, administration is going to be most of your job, right?
It is an administrative job.
Paperwork isn't everybody's favorite thing to do. You would try to get yourself out from behind the desk as much as you can?
Absolutely. Because as the sheriff, you are law enforcement and you are a politician. I mean, you've got to be a blend of both. And as the politician part of it, you've got to get out. You've got to be part of it. At the same time, you've got to be willing to put handcuffs on somebody if they need it, because you are still there for their safety. But no, I absolutely would be out from behind the desk and out in the public talking to people, because again, not just for the deputies, but the connection of the sheriff and the public is a big deal. That's one of the major complaints that I hear about the current administration is the current sheriff's unreachable. So I obviously want to change that. I'm a talkable guy. I like to talk to people and see people. And again, they get to voice their concerns to me because as the sheriff, the buck stops there. You're the one elected and you're the one that has to make these hard decisions, or you're the one that gets to answer for the good decisions and the bad. So you need to be out and be a part of the public, just like you're telling deputies to be.
All right. Well, that's all my questions. You got anything else you want potential voters to know about yourself?
I'm in general just a good, happy Christian guy, and I want the best for Polk County. I want the best for it, not only because I live here, my kids are here, but I want everybody to feel safe. I want everybody to be happy. And I think out of the choices we have now, I think I'd be the best one.
All right. Well, thanks for your time and good luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's it for my series of interviews with candidates for Polk County Sheriff. I delayed releasing them until everyone had an opportunity to be on the podcast. My interview with Clayton Price is just one episode back, and I talked with Neenan Nesbitt a few weeks ago. Tim Wright tentatively agreed to do an episode, but he didn't follow up or respond to my efforts to arrange a time. No Democrats filed to run in their party's primary. Early voting is already underway and runs until February 28th. Election Day is the 3rd of March. Thanks for listening, and please send your comments and feedback to jamesh@polklore.com.